Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, January 4th, 2024. Vayelech ish mi beis Levi, vayikach es bas Levi. A man who was from the tribe of Levi married a woman who was also from the tribe of Levi. Those very simple words introduce the birth of perhaps our greatest leader, Moshe. It all starts with this man and this woman getting married. It does seem like kind of an unusual introduction to the birth of the greatest leader the Jewish people has ever had, the greatest prophet we ever will have, Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, it's rather inauspicious, a man, a woman. It's anonymous, we don't even know their names. Later, the Torah will tell us their names, not this week's Torah portion, but the next Torah portion. And those names are Amram and Yocheved. Amram, Moshe's father, Yocheved, Moshe's mother. But how do these very simple, almost pedestrian words set the stage for the birth of our greatest prophet and leader? So the Ramban says, Nachmanides says, that it has to do with writing style. And he refers to this, you could refer to it as stylistic brevity. The main subject at the beginning of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, and this week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Shemot, the main subject is the birth of Moshe, so we want to focus on Moshe. And we don't want to go into the other details, because if we would mention Amram and we would mention Yocheved, we would have to give their genealogy, their parents, their grandparents, going back all the way to Yaakov, to our forefather Jacob. So it would be a distraction from the narrative at the beginning of our portion, which is the birth and the growing up of Moshe. And so the details of Moshe's parents are reserved for later, after Moshe's already born, after we know who he is. The Torah comes back and fills in the gaps. Okay, that's a very literary answer. But I want to share with you an insight from Rabbi Zalman Sorotzkin. His insight is that the Torah is teaching us a very important and profound and relevant idea. And that is, anybody, any couple, could give birth to a child who would grow up to be Moshe. Someone might think, well, it must be such a great person, a great teacher, a great leader, a great prophet. It must be he comes from an illustrious background. His parents must be wonderful, great, famous people. It turns out, yes, they were. We learn later, our sages tell us about the greatness of Amram, and the Torah tells us about the greatness and the courage of Yocheved. But the Torah omits that here because we don't want people to think that only special parents could bring a special child into the world. It's not true. It's not true for a great person in any area of life to have been brought up with great parents in a great environment. It's not necessary. If it were the case that the Torah would have told us about Amram and Yocheved, and we would know how great they are, maybe we would have said to ourselves, okay, fine, sure. Of course Moshe turned out to be such a star. Look where he came from. But this is a crucial point. It was not necessary for Moshe's parents to have been great people or even good people. The greatest of people can come from the plainest of parents. And the opposite is also true. Not infrequently, the children of a very, very great person do not live up to that parent. And the Talmud, by the way, mentions this specifically in connection with Moshe, because Moshe's own sons did not turn out the way one would have thought if a person thinks that just having a father who's a very, very great person means that you're going to do well in life. It doesn't mean that. Now, it is certainly true that within Judaism, within Jewish history, there are dynasties of one type or another. Just in the modern period, certainly there are Hasidic dynasties where there are leaders of children after children after children generations. We could discuss certainly the Soloveitchik family as a dynasty. There are dynasties, but the point is it doesn't need to be so. And similarly, the Torah repeatedly shows the greatness of younger siblings over older. Think about everything we've been studying since the beginning of the Torah this year. Yitzchak over Yishmael, Yaakov over Esav, Yosef over his brothers, Ephraim over Manasseh, Moshe over Aharon. The younger very, very often seems to excel. And here's the lesson the Torah wants us to understand. Greatness comes from one's own merit and effort. Parents can help. Parents can hinder. But ultimately, it is up to the individual. I've had the opportunity to share this message privately many times. Someone will tell me that they feel shame over the wrongdoing of a parent. Maybe they had gone to prison. Maybe there was a situation of domestic abuse. Maybe many, many other examples. And a person will come to me and they'll express shame that they come from such a person. And someone will say to me that they feel shame, embarrassment over what their child has done. Maybe the child has committed a crime. Maybe the child has gone off the path of Judaism. Maybe they've intermarried, whatever it is, any sort of example. And the parent will feel shame. I'm embarrassed. What does it say about me as a parent? And in every such case, I say or I don't say what I think is appropriate. Meaning, I say what I think is appropriate and I hold back from saying something if I think that that's appropriate. But I also add this. You will ultimately be evaluated by your actions and your character alone. Only you will determine you. Not your parents, not your children. It's up to you. So we've looked at the passage I want to discuss with you now. We've looked at this in depth before together. It is truly bizarre. It's a large chunk of this week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Shemot. And I repeat it tonight, revisit it tonight, in order to share a new lesson from this passage. So very quickly, let's review it. Moshe had run away from Egypt. Moshe haya ro'eh et son Yisro chosno. He was a shepherd for his father-in-law. He married a woman named Tziporah. His father-in-law is Yisro. He was watching out for the flocks. And while he was watching out for the flocks, Vayar v'hine hasneh boer v'esh v'hasneh einenu ukol. He sees that there's a bush that's burning, and there's a fire inside the bush, but the bush is not being consumed. We discussed this image earlier this week. And Vayikra elav Elokim. And God calls out to him. Vayomer Moshe, Moshe. God says, Moshe, Moshe, Vayomer hineni. And Moshe says, here I am. Vayomer Hashem ra'o ra'isi as ani ami asher b'mitzrayim. God says to Moshe, I see the terrible persecution and the suffering of the Jewish people in Egypt. V'ata l'cha v'eshlachacho el paro. Now I want to send you, Moshe, to Paro, to the leader of Egypt. V'hotzeis ami b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim. And you will be the one to help lead my people, the Jewish people, your people, out of Egypt. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. This is what God is offering to Moshe. Vayomer Moshe says, Mi anochi ke'elecha Paro. Who am I to go to Paro? So God answers and says, Vayomer ki yeh imach. Don't worry, I'll be with you. You're not going alone. I will be with you. I'll tell you what to say. I'll tell you what to do. I'll help you. Don't worry, you won't be going alone. Vayomer Moshe, so then Moshe says, V'amarti lehem, when I go back to the Jewish people and tell them that you have appointed me to go to Paro to lead them out of Egypt, V'amruli mashmo, they're going to ask me, what's your name, God? Ma'omar lehem, what should I say to them? I don't even know what to say. What's your name? God says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I shall be what I shall be. Okay, that's a complicated discussion. What does God mean? But Moshe doesn't know how to refer to God, and God tells him, here's the answer. Okay. Vayan Moshe says, Vayomer v'heim lo yaminu li, but they won't believe me. You're sending me on a mission. They're not going to believe me. I'm going to go tell the Jewish people it's time to leave Egypt. They're not going to believe me. Vayomer Hashem elav, God says to him, don't worry, I've got a plan. I will show you how to do a miracle. And you'll do this miracle, leman yaminu, in order for them to believe that you are telling the truth, that you are being sent by God, by me, God, to take them out. And God says, if for some reason that first miracle is not enough, I have a second miracle. Then Moshe says, you know what, God? Please. Lo ish dvarim anochi. I'm not a man of words. I can't speak well. I'm not the right person to be a speaker, to go to Paro, and I'm not effective in that way. I can't do that. Vayomer Hashem elav, God says to him, Mi sam pel la'adam, mi yasum ile mocheresh. Who do you think gives human beings the power of speech? You go, and I will put the words in your mouth. And later we learn, God says later, I will have Aaron, your brother, be your spokesman. So I'll tell you what to say. You'll say it to Aaron, and Aaron will speak the words. So we'll take care of that problem. Vayomer, and Moshe says, Be Hashem, please God, shlach na biyad tishlach. Send somebody else. Vayichar af Hashem. And then God becomes angry and says, I'm not asking you anymore. I'm commanding you. Go to Egypt. Go to Paro. Lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. Please excuse me. I know that this is not respectful to say, but I know that I'm not God, and I know that my children are not Moshe. But this sounds like it could have been in our house. It's a scene from my family. Help clear the table. I'm busy. Make your bed. I don't know how. Stop fighting with your sister. She started it. I mean, I understand, but I'm amazed by God's patience. Every excuse that Moshe provides about why he should not go on this mission, Hashem has a calm response. No matter how many objections are raised, God has an answer for everything. So it's interesting that there's a story like this in the Talmud. The Gemara tells a story about this, about the famous Talmudic sage Hillel. Hillel lived near the end of the Second Temple period. He lived in Jerusalem. He was originally from Bavel, Babylonia. He was not only one of the greatest sages of his time, he was also the Nasi, the prince, the head, the spiritual head of the Jewish people at that time. And he had a quality about him. One of his amazing qualities is that he was never impatient. He never lost his temper. So the Talmud tells the following story. The Talmud says that there were once two people, and one made a bet with the other. I'll bet that you can't get Hillel to lose his temper. And the other one says, sure, I can get Hillel to lose his temper. I can irritate anybody. And they bet 400 zuz. 400 zuz was a lot of money. A lot of money. So the man took up the challenge, and he decided, I'm going to go to Hillel on Friday afternoon, just before Shabbos. Everyone's rushing around. It'll be easy to aggravate Hillel and get him to lose his temper. So it's Friday afternoon. Hillel was bathing, getting ready for Shabbos. The man comes outside his home and starts yelling, "Where's Hillel? Where's Hillel?" Which is certainly not the respectful way that you would try to get the attention of one of the greatest personalities of the time. Where's Hillel? Where's Hillel? And Hillel put on a robe and he came outside and he said, "My son, what can I do for you?" And the man said, "Well, I have a question I want to ask you." And Hillel said, "Sure, go ahead. What is your question?" And the man said, "Why is it that the head of Babylonians, the heads of the Babylonians, they're oval, they're not round?" It's a ridiculous kind of a question. It probably was also intended as a dig, as an insult, because Hillel originally came from Bavel, from Babylonia. Hillel said to him, "My son, you've asked a very, very good question." And the answer is because in Bavel, in Babylonia, the midwives are not such experts, and they don't know so well when they deliver a baby to make sure that the head, the skull, is formed properly. So the heads of babies that grow up from Bavel, from Babylonia, is a little bit unusual. Okay. The man goes away, and he waits an hour, and he comes back. And he comes to the front of the house. "Where's Hillel? Where's Hillel?" Hillel again puts on his robe. He comes outside. "My son, what can I do for you?" Man said, "I have a question for you." Hillel says, "Sure, ask your question." The man says, "Why is it that the eyes of the people in Tadmor, a certain place, why is it that they're always teary? They always have tears in their eyes?" Again, it's a ridiculous question. Whatever it is, Hillel was not an ophthalmologist. Why would you ask him this question? And why would you bother him late Friday afternoon when he's obviously trying to get ready for Shabbos? And Hillel says, "My son, you've asked a very good question. It's an excellent question. The reason is because they live in an area where there is sand and strong wind, and the sand often gets into their eyes, and that's why there are tears in their eyes." Man went away, came back an hour later, same thing. "Where's Hillel? Where's Hillel?" Hillel comes out with his robe. Man says to him, "I have a question." Hillel says, "Go right ahead." And the man says, another crazy question. Why is it that people from Africa have wide feet? Stupid question. But Hillel says, it's a very, very good question. And the answer is because they live in an area where there are swampy places, and they have to have wide feet in order not to sink down. So it helps them be able to navigate their natural terrain. Then the man says to him finally, he says, listen, I've got many more questions to ask you. I'm not finished, but I'm worried you might get impatient. You might get irritated. So Hillel sits down on the step and he says, ask all the questions you want. I have all the time that you want, all the time that you need. Go ahead and ask whatever question you'd like to ask. So the man got angry. And the man said to him, are you Hillel, the one that they call the Nasi of Israel, the prince, the leader of the Jewish people of your time? And he said, yes, Hillel, yes, that's me. And this man in his anger said, well, if it is you, may there not be many more like you in Israel. And Hillel said, why would you say such a thing? What have I done to bother you? And the man says, well, I'll tell you what you did to bother me. You cost me 400 zuz because I took on a bet that I could irritate you and get you to lose your patience. And I've lost the bet. I've tried and tried and tried with all these stupid questions at a time that's very hectic, and you still remain calm. And Hillel said to him, my son, it is worthwhile for you to have lost all of that money, and for Hillel, for myself, not to have lost my patience, not to have lost my temper. A number of times it happened to me. I was getting ready for Shabbos. It was last minute. It was hectic. And I get a phone call. And I would think to myself, this is it. This is my chance to be like Hillel. Of course, the difference is because Hillel didn't know the story. And I heard the story. But this is my chance. It is the closest I will ever come to being like Hillel. All that is to say, if you are ever considering calling me just before Shabbos on a Friday afternoon, please call. I beg you, please call. I need it. I need it. And your call and your question is important. Okay, but Hillel never loses his temper, but God finally has a limit. After all of the challenges and objections that Moshe raises that God responds to in a very calm way, finally, when Moshe says these words, Vayomer bi Hashem shlach na biyad tishlach, please God, just send somebody else. All of a sudden, after this whole thing has been going on, Vayichar af Hashem b'Moshe. Now God gets angry. Now God gets angry and says, Moshe, I'm not asking anymore. Go to Egypt. What happened? I mean, why does God get angry here and not at all of the other objections that God so easily answered? I mean, wouldn't that have been the first thing for God to say? Listen, if I'm telling you that I'm telling you to go, obviously whatever objection you have, I know the objection and I'm still telling you to go. So, but God answered every single one of them. Why with these words does Hashem, so to speak, lose his temper? It's not the right words. Get angry. Vayichar af Hashem. God gets angry and says, no more asking, no more discussions, no more back and forth. Go. I'm commanding you. Go. Go to Egypt. Subject closed. Why here? So I want to share with you an insight of one of the traditional commentators to the Torah whose work is known as Bechor Shor. And he says something very, very important. He says that as long as Moshe was raising objections to his taking on this mission, and the objections related to the shortcomings that Moshe had from his perception, that he perceived that he had shortcomings and an inability to do that mission, so then God would respond, no, it's not a shortcoming. I'll take care of it. God doesn't get angry. But when Moshe says, Shlach na bi tishlach, please send somebody else, that's when God gets angry. Because that's when Moshe simply says, I want somebody else to have the responsibility. Let somebody else take the burden. And that response raises God's anger. When we're faced with a challenge, a difficult task, we have to face it. Of course, we have to deal with our own abilities and lack of abilities, of course. But to respond by simply shifting the responsibility to somebody else, that's not the right way. When we are asked by God to do a job, that means that there is no one better to do that job. Allow me to share with you one last piece for tonight. So, a very, very short passage that follows the passage we just discussed. This is extremely cryptic, very mysterious. So I'll just read the words. Vayhi baderech mamalon. So, okay, Moshe finally gets the idea. He takes his wife, his son Gershom. They had a newborn son, Eliezer, and they start traveling to Egypt. And they were traveling on the way, and they spent the night at an inn. Vayifkesheu Hashem vayivakesh hamiso. God was about to kill Moshe. But that's what the words say. The commentators say, Rashi says, Levi Shlomo es Eliezer beno, because he had not done a bris for his son Eliezer. He was a newborn, and he reached 8 days, supposed to have a bris Milah, circumcision in 8 days, and he did not, Val Shenis Rachel, and because Moshe was careless about doing this mitzvah, he didn't perform the bris for his son. Nenash onus misa. God decided that it was appropriate that Moshe's life be taken, that Moshe be killed. Vatikach Tziporah tsar. And Tziporah, Moshe's wife, the mother of the baby of Eliezer, took a tsar. Literally means a reed, but it means something that grows, but it's has a very, very sharp edge. Vatichros es arlas bana, and she cut off the foreskin of the baby, meaning she did the bris milah, she did the circumcision. Vataga l'raglav, and she took the piece of skin she had cut off and she threw it at the feet of her husband Moshe. Vatomer, and she said, Ki chasan damim atali, you're the one that almost killed my husband. Meaning, she's married to Moshe, and she's speaking to Moshe, you were almost the cause that you should be killed. I don't know. I mean, so let's start with a simple concept. You see from here, right, that a woman is qualified to be a moel, to do bris milah, to do circumcision. Because it says that Tziporah did it. It's an actual narrative in the Torah. If Tziporah did the bris for her son, obviously it was because it was permissible according to Jewish law. In fact, our rabbis in the Talmud debate about this, and there's a dispute about this. One opinion says, yes, she did the bris Milah, and the Talmud says, Melamed, this comes to teach us, She'isha ksheira lamul, that it's permissible for a woman to do a bris on a baby boy at 8 days. There's another opinion in the Talmud that she didn't do the whole bris, she just started it, but Moshe finished. In any event, there's a very interesting conclusion from the point of view of traditional Jewish law, and that is, according to the law, a woman is qualified to do a bris milah. However, the custom, the minhag is that women do not serve as a mohel. Okay, outside of the Orthodox world, of course, women do, but within the Orthodox world, it is still the custom to this day that women do not perform the actual bris itself, even though there is an actual precedent in the Torah. Okay, interesting discussion. We'll set that aside. Let's come back to what's going on here. What's going on here? How could it be? Moshe's grand mission. And remember, God spent 7 days convincing Moshe to take this mission. And it's not just a little thing to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, to bring down the Torah, to lead them to Israel. I mean, it's a gigantic, gigantic thing. And it was going to be over before it started. God was going to kill Moshe before he even started the job that he had spent 7 days convincing him to take. I mean, how is it possible? It defies understanding. Furthermore, how is it possible that if a father delays a bris for whatever reason, okay, a baby boy who is healthy is supposed to have a bris on the 8th day, fine. Even if it's Shabbos, fine. If there's a delay, okay, for no reason, it's not the right thing. Okay, fine. But God forbid, the father should be, God forbid, I can't even say the words, deserving of the punishment of death for delaying the bris of his son? I mean, it's unfathomable. It's unheard of. How in the world is this happening here? And finally, Moshe had a very good reason to delay the bris, because God commanded him to go to Egypt. And if you're going to do a bris on a baby boy 8 days old, you can't just keep traveling on a camel through the desert. You're going to have to stop and let the baby heal a little bit before it's safe. And God had commanded him to go to Egypt. Remember, we just said this. Vayichar av, God became angry and said, I'm commanding you, Moshe, go to Egypt. So Moshe had a good reason to think, I better not delay for anything. I better not delay for any reason. I'll do the bris when I get there. When God finally gets angry at Moshe, so Moshe took his wife, Tziporah, his son, Gershom, his newborn son, Eliezer, and they got moving right away. How is it that this almost cost Moshe his life? One of the great scholars, leaders, teachers, role models of our generation was Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein, of blessed memory. I've shared with you a number of stories about him and a number of teachings. I want to share with you a brief comment that his son, Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein, shared at his hesped, at the eulogy, when his father, Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein, passed away. He shared a lesson that he and his siblings had learned from their father and saw their father act throughout daily life. The Talmud, in discussing the laws of Chanukah and the laws of Shabbos candles, asked the following question: what would happen in an extreme case where a person cannot afford both the cost of Shabbos candles and Chanukah candles on the Shabbos of Chanukah? So you have to light both. What happens if a person can't afford? Which takes precedence? And Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein explained, the lighting of the Chanukah menorah is the mitzvah Pirsume Nisa, to publicize the miracle so that everybody in the public should know about this miracle. We put it in the window in Israel, we put it in the outside our home so that everyone should see it. It's for the community, it's for everyone to see. Shabbos candles are for the benefit of the family. Therefore, the purpose of Shalom Bayis, that there should be harmony in the home, that the family should be able to eat together, to sing together, to be together, to enjoy each other's company. Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein said, the candles of Shabbos take priority over the candles of Chanukah because you must never put the community before your family. Your family comes first. There's a mitzvah that relates to what the public sees. There's a mitzvah that enhances your private family life. Your family comes first. And so the message to Moshe in this passage is, Moshe, first give your son a bris, and then go save the Jewish people. Your son comes first. Not only that, but if Moshe didn't see this on his own, then every other quality he has is insufficient to merit that type of leadership. If a person doesn't attend to their own needs, to their family's needs first, they are not fit to lead others. That's the lesson that Tziporah taught Moshe. Now, the truth is, it's hard to know what to do. Sometimes there may be an exception. But here, Moshe made a mistake. And Tziporah teaches him the correct priorities that he should have. And Tziporah likewise teaches all of us the first rule of leadership is that your family comes first. My friends, I wish you a beautiful evening and a great Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.